Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to talk about something a lot of elk hunters don't want to hear, but need to understand if they ever want to become truly consistent. Because the truth is, success in elk hunting isn't built on what works. It's built often on what didn't. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter and outdoorsman. After 34 years of hunting Western big game, I can tell you this: most of what made me better didn't really come from success. It came from a lot of blown stalks, tons of bad decisions, bad wind, a lot of missed opportunities that forced me to figure out what actually went wrong. And that's where a lot of elk hunters get stuck. They experience failure, but they don't necessarily always learn from it. So in this episode, we're going to break down why failure is not something to avoid. It's something you need to use. And more importantly, how to turn those mistakes into understanding so your results stop feeling random and start becoming repeatable. Most elk hunters believe success in elk hunting is simple: put in the time, work harder than everybody else, stay longer, go further, and eventually it's going to come together. But that's not really how it worked for me, because effort by itself doesn't create results. It just creates more exposure to the same mistakes. And that's where a lot of elk hunters get stuck. They might be putting in the miles, they might be hunting hard, they might be doing everything they think they're supposed to do, but nothing seems to change. Year after year, it all feels the same. Not because they're not trying, but because they're not correcting, right? Effort without correction turns into repetition, and repetition without understanding turns into years of doing the same things incorrectly. That's the hard truth. A lot of elk hunters aren't actually learning from their seasons, they're reliving them. Same decisions, same assumptions, same outcomes, because they measure progress by how hard they worked instead of what they actually improved. So the shift here is really, it's simple, but it changes everything. Stop asking, did I hunt hard enough? And start asking, what did I get wrong and why? Because that's where real progress starts. And that's the difference, in my opinion, between time in the field and getting better. Failure is what strips everything down to reality. Because when things go wrong, you don't get to hide behind assumptions. You're forced to see what actually caused the outcome. A blown stalk exposes your wind mistake. A missed opportunity exposes your positioning error. An empty basin exposes how you miss terrain, possibly in your scouting. Those moments aren't random, they're feedback. And that feedback is what teaches you what actually matters in elk hunting. Not what sounds right, not what you've heard, but what's real. That's why early success can actually slow learning down. If something works before you understand why, it can create false confidence. You think you made the right decision when in reality, conditions just happen to line up, so you repeat it. I have been there for sure. And when it stops working, you don't know what changed. Failure doesn't give you that option. It forces you to break things down, to question your decisions, and to connect cause with effect. Success hides mistakes, but failure exposes them. And once you start seeing those patterns clearly, that's when you're going to start guessing and you're going to start having a lot more understanding of elk. Most elk hunters experience failure, right? We see that in the success rates. Very few elk hunters actually, in the reality of things, are successful every year, but very few actually turn that into progress. All those failures out there, but not a lot of progress from year to year. Apparently, fewer than 10 to 14% every year, because instead of breaking it down, they explain it away. They blame luck, they blame the elk, they blame pressure, weather, other hunters, anything outside of their control. And once you do that, the learning stops, because if the outcome wasn't your fault, there's nothing to fix. And that's where hunters stay stuck for years. Same mistakes, same results, maybe different excuses. The shift comes when you stop focusing on the symptoms and you start identifying the cause. A blown encounter isn't bad luck. It's usually one of a few things. Maybe the wind gave you away. Maybe positioning was off. You moved at the wrong time. You misread how elk were using the terrain. Those are causes, but most hunters never get that far. They stay at the surface level. They just disappeared. They didn't respond. There were too many people. And that's symptom thinking, right? Cause thinking asks a different question. What actually caused that outcome? And that's where everything changes, because once you start identifying real causes, you can fix them. And once you fix them, results stop feeling random and start becoming predictable. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory, it's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. There's a point in elk hunting where everything starts to slow down and make more sense, but it doesn't all happen at once. It happens when failure stacks correctly, not just experiencing it, but actually learning from it. You might start noticing things you didn't see before, like wind patterns beginning to repeat, or you recognize how thermals behave in certain terrain. You start seeing why elk use one slope instead of another, or movement stops feeling random and starts feeling predictable. Those are all shifts. And it doesn't come from one good hunt. It comes from enough corrected mistakes all stacking together until patterns start to emerge. And that's where a lot of hunters miss out. They're getting the same feedback, but they're not processing it that way. So nothing really connects. But once it does, for the ones who are trying to process it, that's the click moment where you stop chasing elk and start understanding them, where you no longer have to react to what just happened. Now you're anticipating what's about to happen. And that's where elk hunting changes, because now you're not hoping to get lucky. You're positioning yourself where things are supposed to happen before they happen a lot of times. And there's a big difference between experience and control. Experience is just time, but control is understanding. And most hunters have more experience than they think, but far less control than they need, because just spending time in the mountains doesn't automatically make you better. It just gives you more exposure. Control comes from knowing why things happened and how you're going to adjust to them. And that only comes through corrected failure. Failure teaches you where you lose control. When the wind shifts and blows an encounter, that's control. When elk move and you're out of position, that's control. And over time, those lessons start stacking. Now you begin to recognize when to leave an area instead of forcing it, or when to stay longer instead of moving too soon, when not to push, even when everything in you wants to close the distance. All examples of control. You're not hunting elk anymore. You're controlling variables. You're controlling the wind, your position, your timing, your movement. And when you start controlling those instead of just reacting to them, that's when consistency is going to build. Failure only makes you better if you know how to use it. And this is where a lot of elk hunters fall short. They experience failure, but they don't break it down. They move on too fast. They get frustrated, or they change areas, or they try something new without ever understanding what actually just happened. That's how progress slows down. If you want to get better faster, every encounter, good or bad, must be analyzed, not emotionally, but objectively. Break it down. What did the wind do? Where was your position? What was the timing like? How were the elk moving? Because every outcome comes from most of those variables. If you can identify which one failed, you can fix it. And that's how learning is going to accelerate for you. That's where your system comes in, right? One of the systems that I talk about a lot is locate, evaluate, position, execute, and adjust. And that last step, adjust, is where failure turns into progress. You take what just happened, you correct it, and then you apply it immediately to your next scenario. Not next season, not later in the hunt, if you have to, because the season's over. Obviously, that's what we do. But whenever possible, we apply it right now, because failure only works if you process it correctly. Because when you do, every mistake shortens your learning curve and moves you closer to consistency. I've been hunting elk and other Western big game for over 34 years. And I'll tell you this honestly, it didn't take me 34 years to learn elk hunting, right? But it did take me a very long time to make these kinds of adjustments to how I think about elk hunting. Because for a long time, I was like a lot of hunters. I put in the time, I worked hard, I stayed committed, but I wasn't improving the way I should have been, not the way I wanted to. Not because I didn't care, that's pretty darn sure, but because I wasn't correcting the right things. I was repeating the same mistakes I didn't fully understand, blowing elk with bad wind, or getting out of position, or moving at the wrong times. And instead of breaking those down, I just kept going, right? Just keep hammering. More time, more effort, same results. That's the trap. Time doesn't make you better, it's the correction that does. Everything changed when I started taking more responsibility for the outcomes, when I stopped blaming conditions or other hunters and started identifying causes. That's when progress accelerated, and that's when things started to connect. And that's the shift I want you to make, because you don't need decades to figure this out. You just need to start correcting what matters. Most elk hunters think success in elk hunting is something you earn over time. Some of that is true, but time isn't the deciding factor. Understanding is. Failure is not the thing holding you back, it's the thing trying to move you forward. Every blown opportunity, every mistake, every situation that didn't come together is giving you information. The problem is most elk hunters don't use it, they just keep repeating it. The shift here is to start paying attention, start asking better questions, start correcting what actually caused the outcome. Because when you do that, everything starts to tighten up. Your decisions get clearer, your positioning gets better, your encounters become more consistent, and over time, success stops feeling so random and it becomes predictable. That's the goal, not to avoid failure, but to use it the right way. Because when you do, you don't just hunt elk, you understand them, and that's when everything changes for you. Now, if you want to go deeper into elk movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the elk hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how elk actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. If you want hands-on application and real-time breakdowns, we have an in-person Elk Camp 2026 that is built around this same philosophy: structure, preparation, and execution in real terrain. 90% of Elk Camp is going to be running you through scenarios. You can check out Elk Camp at backboneunlimited.com. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of elk resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.